gentlemen, this is the Right Guys podcast, where Joe Biden says, and now your hosts, Josh Hammerling and Max McGuire.
Welcome back to the podcast. Couldn't have said it better myself. My name is Max McGuire.
I'm Josh Hammerling. Man, I love watching the President of the United States sound like a gibbering fool. Like, it's so cool when he's on the national stage. He's in front of other leaders around the world, and he's like,
yeah. Yeah, it sounds like, what was that? Bruce Almighty. You ever see that movie?
Yeah, I do. I was channeling that.
Yeah. Basically, that's Joe Biden. We got a lot to talk about today, but this just happened.
Yeah.
Just happened. Joe Biden, at a speech, decided to pull a Ron Burgundy and read exactly what is on the teleprompter, even when he shouldn't. Here we go.
My theology professor at the Catholic school I went to was a guy named Riley, last name, and he had been drafted by the Green Bay Packers.
Josh, I fond memories of Riley last name.
Yeah.
Riley last name.
It's pretty impressive, though. I mean, if you put it on the teleprompter, he's gonna read it.
Yeah.
Right. So somebody in that staff just has to start getting rid of those pieces, right? He's so controlled, right? Yeah, everything he reads and says has to be so sanitized, right? You got to take out like parentheses, last names, because he'll just read it. Salute the troops, right?
Yeah.
Salute
and there's a reason that it just broke a couple days ago. I'll go ahead and share my screen right now. That the Biden campaign's general election plan going into 2020 is less is more.
Which blew my mind.
They want to shorten the speeches, and they're like, oh, well, we think less is more. No, you realize that the longer he's on stage, the faster the dementia drugs wear off, and the faster he becomes a bumbling mess, talking about God knows what. And that was funny.
Well, this also extends to, less is more. Expect less also seems to be their mantra right now for the election. Less is more, or less is less. You don't have any more.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Get used to high prices. Get used to a weak dollar. Get used to high interest rates. Get used to out of control inflation. Right. And might as well get used to stagflation now, because it's going to face us until we get somebody in there that can change things. Tax cuts are coming back. Did you hear? We're going to tax you more. Good old Joe. I mean, who runs on that and wins? Has there ever been a presidential candidate that ran on more taxes and won?
No. He is quite literally promising to get rid of the Trump tax cuts, which, whether you agree that they went far enough or went too far, either way, it's undeniable that it has led to families paying less in taxes, doubling the standard deduction. It's been good. It's been good for pretty much everyone who pays taxes, no matter what level you're at. You kept a little bit more money in your pocket, which is less than you can say for the Biden administration, who has done pretty much everything they can to make life more expensive for you. And we'll get to that a little bit later towards the end, but their plan really is to prosecute Trump and just make life miserable for everyone else. This Trump trial in New York, which it might be a New York trial. It's got the Biden administration's hands all over it. The people on Bragg's staff have connections to the Biden administration. The DNC, I believe that the lawyer who was just getting testimony from Stormy Daniels yesterday, the prosecution lawyer.
Oh yeah.
He had previously, they had previously been a paid political consultant for the Democrat National Committee. If your resume includes paid political consultant work for the party running against the defendant, you shouldn't be allowed to be involved in the trial, right? I mean that is just the appearance. Whether or not he's actually biased, it creates the appearance of impropriety, which has always been the standard, not now, but always been the standard to justify removing someone or recusing someone.
Pretty wild. And didn't Eric Adams just have a meeting? Well, it was alleged on some of the 24-hour news sources out there that they had been talking to the superintendent of Rikers Island. and they have a plan in place.
Yeah, of course they do.
For Trump to come in, and be incarcerated, right? I mean, sure, you got to have a plan in place, but boy, they're putting the cart before the cart before the horses, or the wagon, or whatever it is, right? They're anticipating putting him in jail. Like, is this already a done deal?
The judge openly threatened the other day to put Trump in jail if he dared mention the witnesses again, which is bogus. The judge in the media is treating anything Donald Trump says about a witness as intimidation and as potentially prejudicial to both the jury and intimidating for the witness. The nonsense of it is that the judge has ruled if Donald Trump talks about the witness, that could prejudice the jury if the news reaches them. But he doesn't feel the same way about the witnesses publicly talking about Trump. So Michael Cohen is set to testify. Every day he is going on social media doing live streams talking shit about Trump every single day. Stormy Daniels just worked, I believe it was on Peacock, of course, MSNBC. I think it was MSNBC, NBC, just released a documentary about this whole ordeal. She was trying to rehabilitate. She was selling that from 2016. So from the moment that she got this payout, she's been working behind the scenes to try and make money from this. And Josh, it's become a farce. It's become an absolute farce. What happened yesterday in that trial, what the prosecution did, should have brought an immediate mistrial. Donald Trump and his lawyers had filed motions earlier in the day warning the judge that they thought that the prosecution was going to go into some really steamy details, was going to want to get Stormy Daniels to recount the alleged details of their alleged sexual encounter. And the Trump team said, Your Honor, we just want to get this out. We object to this. None of that should come in. We would like you to rule on this before it even comes out, that it's not allowed to come in, to stop them from even bringing it up. The judge wouldn't do it. So sure enough, what the prosecutors did is they had Stormy Daniels recount the tale that she's been telling, which you got to actually put it in context. It's the tale that she said didn't happen, didn't happen, and now she's saying did happen. It changes based on how much money is involved. It seems to change based on how much damage she can cause Donald Trump.
Quickly, Josh, is that perjury?
Well,
if the story's always changing, is that perjury?
If she made the other statements under oath, then it could be. But generally, what would happen is it wouldn't be perjury. You'd bring it to the judge. And this is what the Trump team did. Said, Your Honor, her story changes with the wind. It's changed all the time. And it's directly connected to her pursuit of money. We want you to strike this testimony from the record. She's not a credible witness. And that speaks to her credibility, right? If she has a history of telling different accounts of this, just because she holds her hand up and swears to tell the truth doesn't mean that it's the truth. Judge wouldn't accept that. Said, nope, she is a credible witness. It was ridiculous.
It was a masterclass on mudslinging. And using a courtroom to do it. That's why it's a masterclass, right? You got something like that into the public record in the trial against the man who has been president of the United States, against a witness who can't keep the story straight, who's obviously trying to profit off of it, right? That alone should have been enough for her. She shouldn't even hit the stand, is the way I'm seeing it, right? I mean, she bear no credibility to her statements once she's testified. So anything she says has to be in question. So why not just remove her as a witness? Why even bring her to the stand if you just didn't want to drag all that through the mud, right? Shotgun approach, the attack on Donald Trump. And this is one of the pellets in that shotgun blast, right? They're desperate for anything. Joe Biden is tanking in the polls, and they are desperately hoping that he ends up in jail by June, right? They want him incarcerated by June. The same guy who might be elected president inside of Rikers Island. How does that even work? I mean, it's more than just a farce, Max. This is a direct attack on a political opponent. This should be so transparent that it shouldn't even be on the news cycles, right? But it is.
No, it shouldn't. It shouldn't. And these were issues that, as I said, were brought before Judge Merchan. And Trump said, listen, they're going to probably want her to recount this sexual encounter. And they're going to turn this into a farce. And the prosecution attorney said, oh, we're only going to use what details are absolutely necessary.
Sure.
Josh, they have her going in detail. What sexual positions were you in? What was it like? Yeah. It's craziness. And you can't unring that bell. It's not like she said, she slip of the tongue, said something she shouldn't have said. That got in front of the jury. So he is not on trial for sexual misconduct. If they're trying to use her testimony to prove that something happened or to convince the jury that something happened, they didn't have to go into that detail.
Yeah.
That prejudices Trump. Absolutely. And what the Trump team did after the testimony is they moved for a mistrial, saying you can't unring that bell. What they did after we warned you they would do it, and you did nothing to preemptively stop them from doing it, has prejudiced the jury to an irreparable level. And here is Maggie Haberman, which I can't stand her, but she's doing minute by minute reporting from the courthouse. She says, this is what Merchan said after the testimony. He said, I was surprised that there were not more objections. He admonished the defense team. The defense has to take some responsibility for that. He said, adding that he did all he could. I objected on my own. Trump's lawyer says, yeah, the defense's team had moved to strike so much of this beforehand, and Merchan still let it in. Yet the judge bristled at that statement. She says that they were under the impression the prosecutors were doing what Merchan allowed during questioning. Merchan disagrees. So on the one hand, they warned him that this was coming. And he knew it was coming. And rather than like approving their motion, right? He just was like on a, okay, we're on the same page with the prosecutors, only do what's necessary. And the prosecutors pull out that crap. So what does Merchan do? He comes out behind and said, you should have objected more. Well, that's what the preliminary objections, right? The preliminary motions are supposed to accomplish. Get this all out of the way. Make sure that the prosecution doesn't bring up this line of questioning, and prepare the judge that this is probably going to come. Be ready to strike it immediately. That way you don't have the optics of Trump's team saying objection, objection, objection.
Yeah.
Because even if their objections are sustained, that can still prejudice the jury. If the jury thinks that the Trump campaign is trying to strike too much of the testimony, think that they have something to hide. They're not supposed to, but they do. Which is why that different sides will go to the judge beforehand to avoid those optics.
Yeah.
What does the judge say? You should have done what itself would have prejudiced the jury. No, he had the opportunity. He said that isn't a problem, and then very quickly realized it was a problem. But rather than accepting that he made a mistake and prejudiced the whole thing, blame the Trump team. Blame the Trump team for not objecting more. Well, it's nonsense.
What else is nonsense is that's happening in front of the most prejudiced jury you could ever get, in the most prejudiced place that it could happen against Donald Trump on top of it, right? This thing is loaded for bear. It's driving me crazy, man. This is worse than Barstool. This has never happened in the history of our country. How many firsts are still coming out with the Joe Biden first 4 years, right?
Yeah.
There are tons of firsts.
Yeah. So the Trump team did everything they could to try and tear apart Stormy Daniels' testimony, right? But they can only do too much because the prosecution got so much in. What I thought they did a particularly good job at is really getting Daniels to admit that she hates Trump, that she really, really hates Trump. Get her to admit, this was the crazy part, that Donald Trump secured a civil judgment against her for hundreds of thousands of dollars. I believe it's over $300,000. And that she has no intention of paying it. Like right there, that's a huge issue. A court has ordered her. She lost a court case. What happens when Donald Trump takes even 1 day longer than he should to pay a civil judgment? New York says, oh, we're going to take your house. We're going to take everything. Meanwhile, Donald Trump secures a civil judgment and basically tossing out her defamation case. But she just sold a documentary. She can. She's working. She's pitching all of this, right? She's making money. She says she has no intention of ever paying it.
She's a self-admitted filmmaker. We know she can make money. We know she is making money. So why isn't she cutting the check to Trump every month, right? Why isn't there a payment plan? Because nobody cares, man. It's go after Trump.
If someone takes the stand, says all this salacious stuff, and then is forced to admit that she actually owes the guy somewhere around $300,000, she has no intention of paying it, and will jump for joy if he's sent to prison. How do you take anything she says with any sort of objectivity? You can't.
No.
You can't. You know how she gets out of paying Donald Trump? He's incarcerated for the rest of his life. Now, there's still ways that he could try and get the money for that, but it's a lot easy to run away from a civil judgment if the other guy is stuck in prison.
Yeah. Sure is hard.
A lot easier to do that.
Run for prison when your political opponent's in prison. It sure is easier to run for. You could be as dumb as Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And run against somebody if they're always in prison or are in court all the time. Trump's not even on the campaign trail, and he's kicking his ass in the polls. That's another thing. Have we ever had a presidential election where the president was so busy he couldn't campaign and he's starting to do better?
Yeah.
Another first, right?
People are realizing, like at the heart of this issue, they're alleging that Donald Trump committed crimes after the election, and that those crimes were to further a felony, which was to interfere with the election. It is not possible to interfere with an election after fact. Well, if you're a Democrat, I guess it's technically possible.
Yeah.
You find some trunks of ballots. You could put your finger on the scale with the adjudication machines. There's ways the Democrats do it, but for a Republican candidate, weeks after an election is over, if the reason that they're able to try this is because it's a misdemeanor in furtherance of a felony, and the felony is to allegedly impact an election in the past, it just doesn't make any sense.
Right?
It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Like even in a world where there was something that went on with Stormy Daniels, and Trump did have his lawyer Cohen pay her the money, Trump could say, you know what? Yeah, I'm not going to pay you. And Cohen says, yeah, I'll just do it on my own. It's not criminal to do that. The election comes and they change their mind. Actually, no, I'm going to invoice you.
Heck, we're going to change the whole law if we have to.
Like even in that hypothetical, it's not, I'm really having bad hair today. My hair is very, very light today.
You're doing great.
Very fluffy. Even in that hypothetical, it's not a felony to do these accounting changes. And one of the things is that I think it was the CFO, whoever handles the accounting at the Trump organization, testified that Donald Trump had no role in deciding how that money would be put into the balance sheets. Now, organizations, companies, basically they have, I really need a haircut. I'm going to do that tonight. Companies, depending on how large they are, they have a threshold for when something becomes big enough to justify more scrutiny, right? When you're a billion plus dollar real estate company, $100,000 legal expense isn't at the level that would really cause them to pause and scrutinize, right? Just like if you or I were to put something as miscellaneous office expenses, right? Oh yeah, I went to the store, you just got some office expenses. You're not going to write down on your book each and every item. So yeah, I went to Staples, got office expenses. Well, what if one of them was something else? Maybe you got some paper plates. That's not an office expense. You just do it, right? Well, with Donald Trump, they're alleging that he was the mastermind behind something that the people who did it said he had no involvement. And if you'll remember, he was approving these expenses after he had already put his company in a blind trust.
Yeah.
Into a trust. And they're saying that he signed off on the checks from the White House. So he wasn't even actively day to day, really involved in the day to day running of the company. His kids had taken over, and they're just saying, "Hey, you okay with this? Yeah, sure. We've all done that. My wife has come to me and said, "Hey, you okay with this?" I say, "Yeah, sure." And then I realized a week later, I just said okay to something I probably should have thought about a little bit more, right? It happens in companies all the time. You tell your boss, hey, I'm going to do this. He yeses you to death. Comes time to take that trip. He's like, oh, I didn't approve that. Yeah, you did. We have experience with that.
Oh.
When bosses might be on their phone a little bit more than than not. It happens. It happens. It's not a felony.
No, it's an accident for the most part. I mean, it's not a crime to spend your own money the way you want to. I mean, a company could spend the money any way it wants to. Trust could as well, right? As long as all the trust board members agree with it. So it's fine. This has never happened to anyone before. Hey, do you remember that the 2020 election was the safest one ever? There's no way anybody could have interfered. But Donald Trump's being told he was interfering.
He was interfering. Yeah.
So how do they reconcile that when there was no? I mean, was it the most secure one ever? Then
it's stupid. It's stupid. If you have a law firm and you need to pay a civil judgment, usually what will happen is you'll either put the money in a trust and the law firm will handle the trust, and then the law firm will disperse the money to the other side, or vice versa. The other side will pay you. It'll go to the lawyers and the lawyers will pay you, right? It is entirely plausible that in an informal kind of arrangement between Donald Trump and Cohen, okay, fine. This is the amount that we're paying. It's not hush money. It's money for it's a contract. Mm-hmm. This is the money we're paid out to her, and invoice us, tell us how much it is, right? Yeah. That happens. Now, usually the lawyer doesn't pay $130,000 out of the goodness of his heart on behalf of the client, unless they have a really long relationship with the client.
Yeah.
You could imagine a world where maybe it's a little expense, and the law firm just says, okay, yeah, we'll just handle it, and we'll just true up later. Right? That happens. And to say that it is a felony is just crazy. And if the crime is you were hiding a felony, they're claiming that he hit a felony 34 times because of the fact that they broke up the payments into a payment schedule. We'll give you a little bit by little bit by little bit.
Unreal. I mean, we're sitting here, we're talking about this stuff, and each and every day that this continues, it just shows that the next person in line that this is going to happen to will be anybody else that signed a non-disclosure agreement with somebody, right? Anybody else who might be running for any sort of office anywhere, which means that the other side is just trying to set you up at this point so they can use lawfare against you. No matter what it is your company did, no matter who it is that you might be trying to quote unquote buy off or silent, like NDAs happen all the time, right? It
until
happens
September,
all the time.
Until September, Biden regime, FTC, I think it is, just implemented new rules that for most people, non-competes will be illegal.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Now that probably could be its own episode on its own.
Yeah.
Lots of problem with NDAs,
especially
when you have skills that you have trained for over a large amount of time, and the NDA says you cannot work in that field anywhere in the country. Yeah. Those are very problematic. Actually, I remember because I remember talking about it with people in our last company, that Colorado had a big case about that, where there was a dental a dental group. And part of joining the dental group, you had to sign an NDA not to practice dentistry if you left. Now that's crazy. Yeah. You went to dental school, went to college, dental school, God knows how many other certificates to train to be this. And the condition of working in one job as a partner is that you can't be a dentist anymore. Obviously, the court threw it out, right? So in a case like that, where you're specifically trained for it, or where it's your skill, like there are companies that say if you're a janitor, non-compete, you can't go work at any other similar companies as a janitor. That's nonsense.
Hogwash.
That's insane. But if you have trade secrets, right, that's a different thing. If you know the ins and outs of a business,
intellectual property. Yeah.
If you make Coca-Cola. You're the guy who mixes up the secret ingredients into Coca-Cola. You can't then go tomorrow, quit your job tomorrow, and do the same thing for Pepsi, right? You know too much. You can't do it. Non-compete. But that's all going to be gone.
How many NDAs and all those things do you think Democrats have out there, especially wealthy Democrats? Right? I mean, I bet the number's a lot, especially right before an election. So has anyone else done these sort of quote unquote crimes that Trump did, that he was charged for? Has anyone else come close? And the answer starts to get kind of gray, right? Because there's people that are going to start sweating this stuff down the road, right? Anytime a new NDA or one of those non-disclosures gets signed by somebody, you know, they got to think in their back of the mind, is this going to come back and bite me in the ass? Is this going to come back?
The standard has always been that everyone is their own individual. Yeah. They have a reputation, they have a family, they have a business, they have standing in their church and their community. So the standard has always been that if someone is trying to hurt you, you have the right to spend your own money to secure their silence. And because it helps you in a number of different ways, it isn't exclusively a campaign expenditure because you just so happen to be running for office at the same time. Otherwise, you'd be basically saying the minute you run for office, you lose the ability to engage in that type of speech, right? Yeah. Because speech is not just how much you speak. Speech also includes silence, right?
Yeah, buying silence.
Yeah. So the Supreme Court has already held that you have the right to spend money on political advertisements, right? That you have the money to spend money to get speech out there into the public forum. What this case involves is spending money to ensure that speech doesn't get out into the public forum for whatever reason you want, whether it's true or not. Doesn't have to be true to say, let's just give her money to make her go away. Right? So if this case actually was to go all the way up to the top, you'd have a very strong argument for that, even in a world where Donald Trump didn't have a personal business family interest in stopping this coming out, even in a world where you could argue it was 100% purely political, that he still had the right as a free person under the First Amendment to spend money to engage in speech, more specifically non-speech. That if he could pay money to put out a television show or a movie or documentary, if he could pay money to put out a documentary about Stormy Daniels' claims, he can spend money to ensure that a documentary never gets made.
Yeah.
Right?
National Enquirer does it every day.
Yes. And to argue anything else is to create out of thin air a restriction on the First Amendment that doesn't exist. Just doesn't exist.
Again, another first.
Another first,
man.
Another first.
They're just piling up. And it gets so frustrating to watch because you can just see this husk of a man out there who's running, who's the president, and this evil body of individuals. It's like a cabal almost that's been going after Trump since 2016, right? The moment he put his hat into the ring, this cabal came out of nowhere, and they're pulling out all the stops on this one, Max.
Yes.
I mean, we've never seen more first, right? We've never seen this kind of political organization, motivation, instigation from a party before, right? And they're fully taking the DOJ. They're leveraging everything to put the screws on Trump, man. It's we must look like jokes to the rest of the world at this point.
Yeah. And you look at this, and I'm sure that there are Republicans who have done this as well. It's not just a Democrat thing, but it's not a coincidence that like the joke, the trope in the conservative movement is that anyone who speaks out against the Clintons winds up dead, right? I mean, whether or not that's completely true or not, there's an awful lot of coincidences that the people who are about to testify against the Clintons or the Clintons' interests conveniently wind up dead. We're starting to see the same thing emerge with Boeing. That the people who blow the whistle against Boeing somehow just happen to wind up dead.
Right. Complications from COVID out of nowhere.
Now,
right?
we know that fool me once,
Yeah.
Shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. This is the second time that's happened with Boeing. So there's a lot of questions there. It's not just natural causes. And remember the first time the guy told his family members, I'm not suicidal, I'm not going to kill myself. They want me dead. So what you see with Stormy Daniels doing, she's been doing this from the minute that Donald Trump got elected, and she decided that even though she'd taken the money, even though she'd signed the deal, she felt safe enough to violate it, believing that she wouldn't have to pay a cent, testifying yesterday that she has no intention of ever paying a cent, and believing that she would be safe to do so. And I'm not saying that you should ever threaten or hurt anyone who violates an NDA like that. You absolutely shouldn't. And she has alleged that that took place without providing any evidence of her own. But this doesn't happen with the Democrat Party. When someone signs a non-disclosure agreement with the Clintons and takes their money, they don't get a platform to speak on, right? No. Even if they do come out years later and tell the truth, the media ignores them. The media completely ignors them. Here, not so much. Yeah. Here, not so much. And it's very obviously political. And yeah, I mean, you look at what's going on. It's just terrible. Terrible.
It makes me afraid of where we're going.
Yeah.
I mean, it starts here, right? This is the start of something that's not the United States anymore. There's no Bill of Rights behind what they're doing. There's no Constitution behind what they're doing. So who's running these things, and what moral compass are they doing?
Yeah.
And you got to remember, a lot of the stuff that Stormy Daniels was doing at the time, she was working with Michael Avenatti.
Yeah.
And as we know, Avenatti is in prison for all, I believe it was fraud, right? At the time.
Mishandling client funds, things like that.
All kinds of really shady stuff. And that's not being brought up in the case, because it seems like everything's on the table now. If you get to bring them in, and you start getting some really odd sexual based questions in the testimony, like, is everything on the table? Can we bring up that she was working with a criminal lawyer, which is what Avenatti is, right? The other lawyer from Trump's side, he got disbarred, didn't he? Or is he still an active lawyer? I can't remember.
He's disbarred. He's disbarred.
He was disbarred, and he was a little slimy, and that's why things got weird with him. We're talking about people that can't practice law anymore.
Yeah.
That were working for them, right? These were not good people who had good intentions.
Yeah.
They
And with Cohen, I think that there's another layer of sliminess, because he's Donald Trump's lawyer. So if there's anything involving the law or legal issues, it's always recommended that you get your own lawyer. Even if you think you're smart, don't represent yourself. Don't risk failing to cross the T's, dot the I's. So when you have a lawyer and he talks to the lawyer about how this is going to go down, it's the lawyer's job to recommend a way to do this that's legal.
Yeah, that's their job.
If the lawyer recommends a way to do this that's illegal, but he explains it to Donald Trump that it's legal, or doesn't say that it's illegal, it's very questionable whether it can be purely Donald Trump's fault when all of that blows up.
Yeah.
Like Michael Cohen says, I'll make this go away. And he doesn't cross the T's, doesn't dot the I's, doesn't file the paperwork properly. Right?
Yeah.
As the lawyer, he should have said, no, don't pay me as legal expenses. This has to go down as reimbursement of a civil award, right? Something like that. So he's more than content with giving them bad legal advice.
Yeah.
So, but then, now that this is all going down, he has completely thrown attorney-client privilege to the wind.
Yeah.
And is just spinning a yarn. If you have a lawyer representing your interests and he breaks the law, right, you're still bound by attorney-client privilege.
Yeah.
I don't know when Michael Cohen was told that attorney-client privilege didn't apply any longer, but it absolutely does.
Yeah.
And to, first of all, audio tape your client. If you've expressed to your client that what you're doing is legal, and you audio tape him so that you can entrap him at a later point and say that he was doing something illegal, that's unbelievable.
It's more than slimy. That's like,
it's unbelievable.
Set up from an early point. I mean, it always feels like there's this grand conspiracy to go after. You know what I mean? And every bad star that could align does and is. I mean, either someone out there is a pure genius who's come up for the attack on Trump, or you just got all these groups of evil people going after him, because it's not about getting the will of the people out there with an elected president. It's about getting their people in so they can push their political agenda.
Yeah, it's money. It's money.
It's money.
Right? Donald Trump's a billionaire running for office. This is a cash cow. How Stormy Daniels hasn't been charged with extortion is beyond me. Like, how is that not here in all of this? You're saying that he paid her off to avoid this from coming to light during the campaign. What does it say for what she did? Demanding payment. Otherwise, she was going to release something that would damage his campaign.
Yeah.
Right? It's extortion.
Yeah. I mean, it's
But
blackmail front and center. And I thought in New York, blackmailing somebody over sexual stuff like that is really a heinous crime at that point.
Yeah.
It's worse than normal. So where are the charges for Stormy Daniels?
None. She's
a
a Democrat.
Here. And they're too busy rehabilitating her image, right? Suddenly she's no longer considered a porn star. They call her producer and writer and filmmaker, right? These are all the new titles they're throwing behind her name instead of porn star Stormy Daniels, right? And Donald Trump, he's got enough money where, even if he did or didn't, if he wanted to, he could get anybody he wanted. And if he's doing that, he's not busy going after supermodels, because that's the other thing he goes after, right?
Yeah.
So I don't see it actually being real. I don't know if it is. He's powerful. He can do whatever he wants.
It's an interesting thing, because to say that he violated election laws to stop information from coming to light is to suggest that the people have a right to the information. And generally, if you talk to a Democrat about the prospect of a sex tape being released, or maybe nude photographs being released, generally where they fall on that question is that no, you can't release the really lurid details, video, audio of a sexual encounter without the other party's consent, right? And that generally the way they fall on the issue is that what happens behind those closed doors, unless it's happening at a pride parade, is private. Not the case with Donald Trump, right? Not the case with Donald Trump. They're treating this as if it is public. It's a public good.
Yeah.
It's like it's a public good to know what one person alleges he did, which is insane. Right.
I mean, imagine if they had the same kind of effort during JFK's administration, when there was the allegations that him and Bobby were dating Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah.
Right. This is no different than that.
Yeah.
Right. And like, that was the biggest kept in public secret that ever existed.
Well, that, and the fact that FDR had polio and is in a wheelchair, which people forget about. The American people mostly didn't know that.
Yeah.
At time of radio, he was always photographed at a seat.
Yeah.
That was kept quiet. That was a time when the media understood that there were some things that shouldn't be revealed to the public in the name of the greater good, right? That it doesn't serve any purpose to tear down a president at a time of war and Great Depression.
Yeah.
Now it's there's a line of people looking for the next scalp, looking to be the next Woodward, who will make a name for claiming a scalp. It's how it goes. It's how it goes.
Yeah.
It's how it goes.
I don't know.
And what we're left with, we played that at the start of Joe Biden reading last name on the teleprompter. What we're left with, though, are really terrible leaders doing really terrible things for the country. There was a quote, I don't know if you saw it, with Governor Hochul of New York. She made a comment about African Americans in New York that boggled the mind.
Are you serious? No, I've missed.
Black kids growing up in the Bronx who don't even know what the word computer is. They don't know. They don't know these things. And I want the world to open up to all of them, because when you have their diverse voices innovating solutions through technology.
So they don't know what a computer is, but you want their diverse voices to innovate technology. That was a that was a Kamala Harris kind of statement.
That is a bunch. Like she's just
the people who don't know what a computer is are vital to innovating technology. What? First of all, wrong. They know what computers are.
Yeah.
Like,
everybody has one and a cell phone.
Yeah.
Like they learn to type before they learn to write these days.
Yeah. Yeah. My son plays
Everybody
ABC
does.
Mouse. He wants a computer so he can play ABC Mouse and learn his ABCs and stuff. It reminded me, though, Josh, of this statement from Biden.
Students in these schools, they have advanced placement programs in these schools. We have this notion that somehow if you're poor, you cannot do it. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It is the bigotry of low expectations. The thinking so low of an entire community that it just comes out that you have white kids, you have poor kids. Well, that's him. That's a Freudian slip, whatever. But it shows he considers the African American community just be a poor community, right? Yeah. The bigotry of low expectations with Hochul. She truly believes this wasn't a misstatement. She truly believes that African Americans in Harlem don't know what a computer is. She almost thinks it's like that scene from Zoolander where they say the files are in the computer and the male models are like, and there's actually part in that, which in this context, very racist. They pretend to be monkeys a little bit, batting around the computer. Like, how do you get into it?
We had a monkey show. We're not doing another.
Yeah, no, not another monkey show. Not another monkey show.
But man, she just has all these prejudices inside of her that just kind of come out when you're on the campaign trail. Like you kind of have these train of thoughts that come out, and stuff comes out of you sometime, whether you got dementia or not. And you're like, oh crap, did I just say that? Right? She knows she made the disaster statement, and the rest of it was just trying to fix it, reconcile it, make sure it didn't happen. Oh yeah, that was a hilarious movie.
The files are in the computer.
Yeah, and they lost. But she was just not, she doesn't seem to come across as bright sometimes.
No.
Right? She just comes across as a talking head who happens to be the governor of New York after Cuomo had to dip, right?
Yeah.
Which another fantastic Democrat governor, right? I mean, kicked out because he was being wrong towards women, right? Or at least the allegations were there.
The craziest part about all of this is like, I remember when I grew up, my dad had a computer. He worked in telecom. So he made sure that we had we never had dial-up internet as a kid. Because he worked in telecom, he just got a dedicated line for the internet. I think we had DSL. So I grew up on like Windows 95, Windows 98, right? Learning how to do it. But today, a kid on their cell phone has more power than those Windows 95 computers did back then, right?
Yeah.
So even if a kid doesn't have a computer, doesn't have a laptop, doesn't have like keyboard typing skills, they likely have a tablet, they likely have a phone that gives them more access to information now than you or I ever had growing up with a computer. Like right now, our cell phones have more computing power than the computers that were on the Apollo missions to land astronauts on the moon.
Yeah, it's not even close. They're not ignorant of it, Max. They know it's there.
Yeah.
They play with it all the time. You'd be surprised how many people are really good at that whole computer and the programming thing. And they're in high school, right? They know it's there. It's where it starts. And it's just, they're just showing their own bigotry because the Democratic Party has never been the party of actual freedom and values.
Yeah.
I mean, if it did, it's gone and it's been long dead. But that's over. I mean,
completely.
It's over for them.
Completely. I wanted to talk to you about something else because this is happening every day in the country, and it's getting. I feel like we're hitting a breaking point. I feel like we're hitting a breaking point of these illegal aliens that Joe Biden has admitted into the United States, committing really heinous, violent crimes. And it feels like we're reaching that breaking point because the argument, and I go through this in my book, but the argument from the left is always that immigrants are far more law-abiding than Americans, which you can get to that if you look at law-abiding, legal immigrants, right? every illegal immigrant, the moment that they put one pinky toe on U.S. soil, has already become more law-breaking than the average American.
They committed
right?
a crime.
So as soon as you separate it into legal and illegal immigrants, it becomes a very different calculus. But they like to say that the way they present the argument is that even if a couple of bad apples come in, by and large, because immigrants are more law-abiding than Americans, bringing immigrants in actually reduces the rate of violent crime.
Bull. Okay, keep going.
Which really shouldn't be how you measure it.
No.
Because we're not really concerned about the rate of violent crime. Because as soon as you admit more people, even if the rate goes down slightly, applying that rate against a larger population leads to more people being victims of violent crime.
Yeah.
Right? So anytime you bring people into the country and more violent crimes are committed as a result, those people have made crime worse. What Democrats are hoping you don't think about is that they're bringing so many people in that the non-criminal class outnumber the criminal class so much that it's only a tiny bump of the needle. But each one of those cases are unique. Each one of those people killed are gone forever. Telling a victim's family it's okay that they were just killed. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Less people
We'll
are
catch
killed.
'em.
If you divide the number of people killed by 100,000 residents, right, it's a slightly lower number. So that's a comfort. No, of course it's not. Of course it's not. There was something that just happened in Maine, which is tragic. There was a car crash. Shutting down a whole lane of the highway. There was a car crash, and unfortunately, at least one woman, has died in this 4-car crash. Shut down the highway in both directions. The crash is being reported to have been committed by a, quote, Maine man. And that's how you know that they're lying to your face. When they call him a Maine man, they're completely lying. Oh, we lost Josh. Josh will be back in a second. I will keep talking while we wait for him. This is from the Maine Wire article out yesterday, just happened yesterday. Man involved in 4-car crash that left Maine woman dead entered U.S. illegally in January. Oguzhan Silder, I doubt that I pronounced that correctly. He entered the United States illegally from Mexico in January. Looks like he claimed asylum because he had immigration status shortly after entering the country, but he did it illegally. Maine DPS said that the pickup truck he was driving a pickup truck rolled over several times after it was struck by Silder's Prius, and that the driver of the truck, 53-year-old Gloria Cascio of Albion, Maine, was pronounced dead at the scene. Her passenger and husband were flown by helicopter to a nearby hospital for treatment. So, looking at this crash, there's really only two ways to look at this. Bringing this guy into the country either made the United States less safe or it made the United States more safer. If you are a Democrat and you say, oh, immigrants are more law-abiding than the average American, what you are essentially arguing is that even if this guy didn't come into the country, this was still going to happen. But we obviously know that isn't the case, right? And not to say that Americans don't cause terrible accidents either. They absolutely do. The difference, though, is that I would venture to guess, maybe I'm wrong, but I would venture to guess this guy hasn't completely gone through the process of getting insured, registered, taking a driver's test, Right? I mean, just think about it. He entered the United States illegally in January. Here we are in May. Right? He has to establish residency in the state, has to go through, pass the driver's test, take the driver's class. I would venture to say that he's not completely in the green in terms of paperwork, training. And that's really the issue, right? It's not that immigrants are bad people. They're not. Immigrants, lovely people. I would venture to say that even many of the people who've entered the United States illegally, absent that crime and the other crimes that they have to commit in order to continue living here illegally, I'd venture to say that many of them are probably nice people too. I've met a number. I used to live and go to school in a town that had a very large illegal immigrant population. And some of the nicest people, aside from the fact that they're flagrantly violating U.S. law to enter and continue living in the United States. The problem you have here is that when you don't control vetting who comes into the country, when you don't have control over calling balls and strikes, you lose the ability to keep out the very people who would pose the most danger to all of us. Here's another one, just out this week. Man charged with the death of a 3-month-old infant in Texas. Authorities in Montgomery County have charged a man in connection to the death of a 3-month-old child last month. Melvin Jesus Aquino Enriquez was charged with injury to a child, causing serious bodily injury, following an investigation that started in April 14, when a severely injured 3-month-old child was admitted to a local hospital.
Oh my. Oh my.
He lived with the infant and the mother in the home. Now, it is not describing the kid as his child. So I don't know if this was his child. It feels like if it was his son or daughter, they would have listed that. But it seemed to be that he was living with the woman who was biologically related to the child. He might have been related, who knows? This comes at a time, Josh, when I know you're seeing it in Colorado too, where the government is actively encouraging people to let illegal aliens live in their homes with them because they have run out of places to put them up.
Max, it's so bad that veterans are getting kicked out of places where they're housing them so illegal immigrants can take those spaces. They're asking wealthy people in the Denver area to let people in, and out of the kindness of their heart, quote unquote. How long before they try to force that to happen, we don't know. Yeah. This is the same time they're building a bunch of free homes for the homeless, which we know that the majority of homeless now in Colorado are illegal aliens.
Yeah.
So they'll just turn into these kind of, I don't want to predict this, but I think it will be these slum-like places where it's just rife with crime, drugs, sex crimes, trafficking, you name it, right? And they're just allowing this kind of, I don't want to say filth, but it's this kind of crime. It's a totally, completely different culture that's being shoved into a place, and there's no way these things are reconciling anytime soon, right? Because the taxpayers are on the hook for millions of dollars. Even the Denver police was reduced by $8 million just so that there would be money in the school system for illegals. Man, people are at that breaking point. They're tired of.
Did you see this?
Of everything. It's wild.
You see this? Man. This is the list of demands that illegal aliens have given to the city of Denver. Demands that what they're demanding to be done related to illegal alien shelter that's being provided by the city of Denver. They're demanding that the migrants be able to cook their own food. And it has to be with culturally appropriated ingredients instead of pre-made meals of rice, chicken, flour, yada, yada, yada. Also, people will not be punished for bringing in and eating outside food. Well, that's an issue. Like, I'm not saying that people should be punished for eating outside food, but if you claim you have absolutely no money and food is being provided for you, and you say you have nowhere to live because you have no money, and you're getting DoorDash, that I have some questions about that. There are a lot of days where I'm like, oh, I could really use, I want some takeout. Maybe I've had a couple drinks. Maybe I just don't feel like driving. Oh, let's do DoorDash. And I get all through and said, it's too expensive. Never mind. I don't want it.
Yeah, it's expensive. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a question that has to be asked. Shower access will be available without time limits.
Which is wild.
Well, the reason you have time limits is when you have a lot of people living in a shelter, everyone needs to use the shower. So it's not like, it's not forcing them to, like, it's not being mean to them. They're saying, we're not in the military, we're civilians. There's only so many showers to go around. Everyone wants a shower that day.
Yeah.
No, you can't take hour-long showers.
Right. There's only so much hot water, right? I mean, you want a hot shower?
Still in a drought. Still going to be a very dry summer. Very dry summer. Medical professional visits will happen regularly and referrals will be made as needed. I don't have a problem with that. If people are sick,
I want to know if there are some dangerous, there's dangerous stuff coming through. There's tuberculosis cases that are flying through the roof. There's types of TB showing up we haven't seen before.
Yeah.
So I want them to be monitored medically. I really do, because
all will receive the same housing support that's been offered to others. That kind of sounds like whatever you give to any other American, you have to give to us. They cannot kick people out in 30 days without something stable established. There needs to be a clear, just process before exiting someone for any reason. Verbal, written, final words. I don't have a problem with that, letting people know why they're being removed. But if they do something so egregious that they need to be removed immediately, it's not a 3-strike policy. If you do something terrible, you're out. All shelter residents will receive connection to employment support, including work permit applications for those who qualify. This is something that I really want to crunch the numbers on, because what we see month after month is that the jobs numbers that the Biden administration puts out are actually terrible, and they end up getting revised downward every month.
Yeah.
I want, like, this last month, how many jobs were created? They said how many jobs were created.
I thought it was like 150, 170,000. The number came out low. It was below expectations, and it's going to be
175,000.
Yeah,
175,000.
Half that probably, because it's weak jobs numbers. It's really weak, although they're saying otherwise.
So if they created 175,000 jobs in the month of April, but the data also shows that U.S. Border Patrol had 137,000 encounters of illegal aliens in between the ports of entry. And we know that the Biden administration is in a mad rush to give as many of these people work permits as possible. The question is, when they come out with 175,000 jobs were created, how many of those jobs created are accounted for by the illegal aliens who have entered the United States, gamed the system, claimed asylum when they don't have a legitimate claim, and as we see in this demand list, demanded work permits.
Yeah, and when those numbers go down, I mean, you'll have 1 million people over the border and only 100,000 jobs made. So there's 900,000 people just rolling in that have no work, no means, no method of living.
I would venture to guess that when you add illegal alien work permits, when you add foreign work permits like H-1B, K-1, things like that, J-1, things like that, I would guess that the total number of jobs created for Americans would be 5 figures. I think it's in the tens of thousands.
Maybe.
Out of 175,000, I'd say it's less than 100,000.
Yeah.
The majority of those jobs would be going to people that wouldn't really qualify as being the American constituency. And then consultations for each person family with a free immigration lawyer.
Wow.
Must be arranged to discuss the progress of their case. So they have come in here, they have made bogus asylum claims because they're not actually fleeing for their life. Most of these people, we're not talking about political persecutions. These people are villagers who have no real enemies. They just would prefer to live here rather than there. We are the only country in the world that allows someone to game the system like this, and then allows them to also demand that we pay for their representation.
Yeah.
In mass. It's crazy.
That's right. I'm reading number 9 there, and it just blows my mind. I mean, no more verbal or physical or mental abuse will be permitted from the staff, including no sheriff sleeping inside and monitoring 24/7. We're not criminals. We don't know that. We don't know that.
We don't know that. In a perfect world, you would have applied for asylum. A background check would have been performed. Questionable how good that background check would be. But ultimately, the government would have a yes or no, yay or nay decision.
Yeah.
These people have jumped that line, said that you need to help us, otherwise we'll be murdered. We'll be murdered or killed or suffer back at home. We have every right to wonder whether they are as good of a person as they claim to be. And if you look at the stories coming out of some of these migrant shelters, especially on Staten Island and Long Island and New York, it's crazy. People getting stabbed, people getting shot. You come to the United States, you claim you have nothing to your name except the shirt on your back and some belongings. How do you go from that to owning a gun in a migrant shelter? Right? I mean, this is crazy stuff. This is crazy stuff. I would venture to say that if you can make it into New York and you can afford to buy a gun, you probably could afford to live outside of a shelter.
A lot of them wouldn't be able to pass any of the background checks to get those guns or to go into any store and be able to buy it in that state. So where did they buy the gun? And wouldn't that act itself be a violation or a criminal act, buying an illegal gun?
Yeah.
It's wild.
I don't have a problem with kids being bused to school. I think there's a general problem of us paying for the education of people who are not actual asylum seekers. I've seen the damage that this does in classrooms because not all these people speak Spanish. It's not like, oh yeah, we'll take them all and we'll just have a Spanish language teacher. This happened in San Antonio last year, 2 years ago, where a bus literally just dumped people off in downtown, and they all spoke a very rare dialect from sub-Saharan Africa.
Whoa.
And they couldn't find anyone in the city to speak to them. They had a hard time even finding people on the phone to be able to do phone consultation translations. And they're just there, just like, oh yeah, well now those kids are in school.
Mm-hmm.
If they can't find anyone in the entire city who speaks their language, how are you supposed to educate them?
Yeah.
And that's just one group.
Wow.
Pretty much every country is represented among the illegal aliens entering across the border. Yep.
I mean,
you can't separate the families no matter what. Okay, well that's nice.
Max, you know what really pisses me off about this whole thing is that they have demands of us.
Yeah.
They are demanding things of us. You have entered our country illegally. You are taking from us. You are essentially stealing from us.
Yeah.
And now you have demands.
And that is not to say
that we have to give you something.
That's not to say that bona fide asylum seekers don't have rights, and that isn't a good idea to give bona fide asylum seekers protections and basic quality of life things. But when people come from South America, and with the exception of Venezuela, with the despotism there, because I think there is actually a legitimate argument that Venezuela has gotten so bad with political reprisals that if you were sent back to Venezuela, you might be killed. Everyone can't make that claim because every villager, like these aren't all revolutionaries. It's not all Che Guevara. All these people they're not getting their own Motorcycle Diaries movie made about them. There's some claims there. But for the rest of the continent, there's no war. There's no genocide. There's no ethnic cleansing. The idea that someone can't go back to Argentina because they'd be murdered is absurd. It's absurd.
Yeah. I just hate that they think that they can just walk in and demand things of me, because this money doesn't just come out of anywhere. It comes out of the people who are paying the taxes. It's coming from American citizens.
Ray had a good point, and he's absolutely right, that Venezuela is emptying their prisons and sending their criminal class here, which absolutely right. Not all of them. Some of them do have some of the people have a legitimate claim, but Venezuela is celebrating. They put out a big press release this year that their violent crime has plummeted. Well, their violent crime didn't plummet because they've all of a sudden had better law enforcement, or their population has suddenly become more law abiding. They got rid of the violent criminals. And where'd they go? They came here. They came here.
And if they were criminals there, do you think they will continue their criminal enterprises here?
Yeah.
And I think we all know the answer to that. I think the answer is yes. And it's violent criminal enterprise. These are some of the most violent people on earth are from Venezuelan prisons, and some of those cartels and organizations in there. They are really hardcore.
Yeah.
But now that's in your small town USA. That's in Denver. That's in St. Louis, Missouri. That's in Milwaukee, right? I mean, it's just happening. It's all over New York. It's all over LA. It's not your country anymore. It's being given away part and parcel to people who have no business being here. And you're paying for it. Happy tax season.
Yeah. Before we leave, I want to bring one more example of this. Undocumented immigrant arrested for kidnapping and assaulting 11-year-old in Lake Worth, Florida. Allegedly snatching an 11-year-old girl off the street in front of her Lake Worth home and sexually assaulting her. He's in the country illegally. He kidnapped a girl off the street and sexually assaulted her.
She's 11.
To claim, when liberals say that immigrants are more law-abiding than Americans, that 11-year-old would not have still been snatched and sexually assaulted if this guy didn't come in the country. When liberals say that they're more law-abiding, they want you to believe that when these people come in, we as a nation become more law-abiding. No, we just have a larger population and a larger number of crimes. Basically, they're saying the population is outpacing the rise in violent crime. Wow, this is all great. This is all great. And Josh, I want to show you this. This is the police booking report. You see what they listed him as?
White.
Yes.
Shocking, because we've talked about this, the whitewashing of criminality, right?
Yes.
So now when the data comes out, violent crime comes in, and then all the stats say it's white people who are the cause of violence.
Yep.
Ooh, we know what's going on here.
Huge problem when it comes to illegal alien or any type of crime reporting. You'd be shocked at just how many of these people are classified as white and just move through processing.
Unbelievable. It's happening all the time.
All the time. It's getting worse. It's not getting better. And more and more are coming in. And at some point, something has to stop, because I really feel, and I hope that we've reached a breaking point here, because another big report we didn't have time to talk about, and maybe we'll talk about next time, is that the Biden administration is finally admitting that the illegal alien admissions in this country and the consequences that has towards housing has partially helped mortgage rates go through the roof.
Yeah. And
the shortage of housing and inflation, all that, it made it harder for Americans to afford a home. Right now, if you wanted to buy a $300,000 home, your monthly payment is going to be about twice the amount that it was if you bought the home when Trump was in office.
Unbelievable.
So maybe we'll do that next time.
So there was a time, as we start wrapping this up here, that in Mexico, they did not want American criminals crossing the border a long time ago, because they didn't want that criminality making its way in. And they vehemently fought against Americans coming into Mexico to the point where it got dangerous and deadly, right? And my point here is that when a group feels like they're being outplayed, outmaneuvered, and outfavored by another, they have a tendency to take the law in their own hands.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they're planning. They want some sort of mass escalation of tensions, right? And then it's just about painting another group of people as good or bad.
Yeah.
It's easier to wage a societal war when you've got sides, right? This is the most disgusting master plan I've ever seen. And that's where we're headed. I don't want it.
We're headed. So we'll have to get into the rest next time, because we're out of time. That's it for this edition of the podcast. If you like the podcast, subscribe, like, follow the podcast, comment if you haven't already. Check us out. Lots of links when we're on Rumble and YouTube. All those links are in the description. We have the audio podcast available: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Audible, Podbean, Amazon Music, all that stuff. So check us out there. Even if you watch us live, it's great to subscribe to the audio version, set to auto download. That way, if you miss an episode, you can listen as you're commuting, driving, or whatnot. That's it for this edition of the podcast. My name is Max McGuire.
I'm Josh Hammerlin.
Remember, the fight to take back our country is not over yet, but the only way we win is if we all stay up and fight together. See you next time.
See ya.